And did he start in the foundry or?
Uh, I don't know where he started. I imagine he did start in the foundry, because it was a long time before he went into he was in the foundry first, and then when the war came, he went into that millwright job, and they only had 5 men that they found that could stand the, pardon me, that they could stand to work that job. They had to pour this casting. It was sort of like a fork, like that, and it slipped over the shell. The shell fit down in here like that, and this kept it from exploding or anything. But to mold that and to get the weight and the pouring of the iron and all that, they were doing all that. And you saw that picture where the men were there looking. They had come from all over to see those men doing that work, and there wasn't any of them that could do it. I've tried to think of the men's names that was working with him, but those 5 men worked there, and whenever they'd come up for a draft, of course then they drafted people, and everybody always wondered why Alvie wasn't drafted. Bryant, a little town, Snoopy, and that was the reason. They just wouldn't let him go. They wouldn't have let him go for nothing. They just wouldn't let him go. That was all there was to it. He was working, and they were attaching a 1,500-pound big door, and that's that picture you saw where he was like he had a rod. He had a rod up his back, all right. He was cast up to here and cleared down to here, and they even cut around here. It was down on his legs, so far they cut around here just enough so he could urinate and things like that.
So how bad was his broken back?
Well, his back was broken so bad that Dave said if it had been one vertebrae lower or higher or whatever it was, that he'd have been crippled forever. Said he'd been
So how old was Dad and Uncle Ed when Grandpa broke his back?
Well, it was after Linda was born, and before Felicia was born, because...
So it had been 48, 49, 50, something like that?
Well, let's see, we can figure it out. How Felicia's 51, because I got pregnant when Alvie got his cast off.
Okay.
And I always told him that we were celebrating. So that's why Felicia's come along. That's truth, but I told him that too.
How long was he laid up with a broken back?
6 months.
6 months. So what did Dad and Uncle Ed do? Did they have to help support the family then? Were they helping? How did you guys get along without that Grandpa's salary?
He got paid from the shop then.
Oh, they had like work
insurance. Insurance took care of his wages, and I don't remember whether he got a little settlement or not in the end from whatever it was at that time.
And he would have been part of International Harvesters Union back then too.
You know what he did? He got hurt that day, and he come home. Dave sent him home.
He just got sent home with a broken back?
Well, he walked out, never let on, gutsy, never felt pain, they said. And he come home. We had the whole house tore up. He had all the roof in the front room out, and we were sleeping in the front room because that's when he was plastering that back bedroom that you've seen. They were plastering and finishing all the walls and out the bathroom and putting in all that. And he come home that day. There my bedroom was out in the front room. Bed was down in the front room there. And we had a fellow that was kid's school teacher. And when he heard that Alvie had this accident at the shop, why, he come right out. And Alvie said, Dave told him to come back up, I think at 1 or 2 o'clock, so he could have his back x-rayed. Some way they had to go to the hospital or something, and they couldn't do it down at the shop, so he had to go there at the hospital. He says, I'm not going. And I know this teacher said, now, Alvie, don't be a fool. He said, you can't do this. He said, you don't want to be crippled forever, maybe, because you're foolish and being bullheaded. Well, anyway, he finally talked Alvie into going back up for the x-rays. Well, the minute he got there, of course, Dave called me, and he said, you've got to get up here. He's got his back's broken, and he says one lower or higher, whatever it was, he said he would have been paralyzed forever. He said he's just a lucky man, and he said we're getting ready to put him in a plaster cast now. And I said, oh my gosh, I could just picture Alvie in a plastic cast, because he's just like Jeff, always on the go. And you wonder where your dad got it. That was it. And he just couldn't sit still, you know. He farmed at night. He did cabinet work. He did just anything like that. He was doing it. He was busy. That's all there was to it. And so he come home that night, of course, and the cast was up here, clear up, just right up to there. And then they cut it out. The next day, it began to dry overnight. And, he was just fit to be tied, you can imagine. So then they took a little saw and they made a hole right here so he could breathe. And they cut this little bit down here, not very much, just a little bit. And then down under his arms, clear around his back, and clear down over his hips in the back. And he was just a mess, I'll tell you. And of course, Dave kept telling him, well, you're not near the mist you're going to be before this is over. Because then they had this net down in there, you know, that they wrapped him in first. And when he began to stink, it was summer and hot weather, and he just fussed and fumed. But anyway, he stood it. So then I think it was about the last 2 or 3 weeks, he got the saw and cut his cast off. He went out in the garage so I wouldn't know it.
He cut it off himself, huh?
Cut it off.
How long was he in it?
6 months. That was it. It was time for it to come off about, but Dave was making him wait a little longer than he thought he ought to. But anyway, his back always bothered him a little, but it just left a hole in the middle of his back, you know, right down in here, just left a hole there, just like there wasn't anything inside it. Just,
and he had a big steel door fall on him. That's how he broke his back.
It just pinned him, and pinned him right under it. They said that if he hadn't been as strong as an elephant, that it would have killed him. Said there wasn't a chance for him, you know.
Jesus.
Even then. But that was one of the stories, anyway, that was true. But your dad, and then he come out of there, and then I think he was working for Millwright then, and he was that same way working there. Anything they didn't want that no one else wanted to do, your granddad did it. He was that kind of a guy. I think he did that all of his life. He wanted to be the very best and do the best and do the most. He didn't want anyone to be better than he was on things. Nothing, never.